Alright, so I've been getting a lot of messages regarding my last video, which was about Resident Evil 4, and basically I talked about how I thought it was overrated. Alright, and basically it had a lot of hype, and it's a video game that people gave it way too much credit, and I didn't think it deserved it, although I did think it was a very good game that is worth checking out. But it is overrated, in my opinion. I got a lot of feedback from this, some negative, some positive, as far as, some people actually agreed with me and thought that, hey, it is an overrated game. I really didn't see what the big deal about it was. Of course, you got the people who actually disagreed with me and thought that the game was actually an amazing game. They're like, hey, you know what? Resident Evil 4 is an amazing game for its time. When it came out, it was like this revolutionary, this new way to play like survival horror games, and it was amazing back then, and that's why it got so much credit, and a lot of people really think it's one of the greatest games ever made. I mean, like, here's the thing, I can understand, once again, why people like this game. I can see the appeal of this game, okay? But I still think it's overrated. After all these years, I still think it's overrated, and then people went to say that, also in reference to my other examples of what I thought were, basically better games, such as God of War and, Tekken 5, and I basically compared it, Resident Evil 4 to those games, especially the God of War franchise, and some people were like, hey, if you think RE4 was overrated, well, I think God of War is overrated, okay? And you know what? I don't agree with that at all. Certainly, if you think whatever game is overrated, that's your opinion. That's, you can think that way if you want to. I certainly feel that way about Resident Evil 4. I still think that way about RE4. I don't agree that God of War is overrated, though. But I can see why people would say it. I can understand why people would say God of War is overrated, even though I disagree with it. Because, me personally, I don't think God of War is overrated. I think it definitely gets a lot of credit that it deserves. There's a reason why God of War was named like IGN's, #1 PlayStation 2 game. There's a reason why GamePro named God of War 2 the best PlayStation 2 game. Okay, so there's a reason why all these companies, these high-profile, these magazines and these video game publications, they really give God of War and God of War 2 a lot of credit, because these are amazing games. They really are very complete, near-perfect games. I do agree, though, that these games are not perfect. They do have their problems. They do have their flaws. I definitely have, I don't think these games are perfect. I don't think that they're a perfect, 10 out of 10 or whatever, but they're pretty close. I guess the biggest complaint that I have with the God of War franchise is that, especially, I definitely had problems with the second God of War, God of War 2, definitely, but just overall, I think that the enemies get repetitive, in God of War 1, God of War 2, the enemies are very repetitive, okay? And you fight the same bad guys over and over again, and it does get redundant. It feels like it's the same bad guys every single stage almost. It's like they all look the same, and you're killing the same enemies again and again. And also, another negative thing that I can say about the God of War games is that, the almost, virtually, it lacked any kind of replay value. It almost had no replay value, especially God of War 1. God of War 2 had some replay value because it had these other, like, challenges and whatnot. But even that, they really are action-adventure games that you play them once, and that's it. You really, it's like, get the experience once and have fun with it and enjoy it once, and then you might not want to play it again, because it's like it's the exact same experience. Why would you want to play an action-adventure, this long, storyline and this epic adventure again when you've already played it? So it has weak replay value, it has weak replayability, and definitely those are some very negative things. They are valid too. I had problems with God of War 2 especially because, when it came to the weapons, man, they fucked up the weapons, man. They ruined some of the weapons, in my opinion. in the first God of War, Kratos had those badass thunderbolts. You know what I'm saying? The Zeus's thunderbolts. I thought they were awesome. They were cool. They were original. It was actually cool to see, you know, somebody hurling thunderbolts at, you know, the bad guys and killing people, hurling these lightning bolts at the enemies. It was just so awesome. And then in God of War 2, they scrapped that. They took that away, and then they gave them these generic bow and arrow. Okay, bow and arrow. Generic shit, okay? Action adventure, we've seen that a billion times, okay? Can anybody say Legend of Zelda? Okay? Bows and arrows, come on. So I had some problems with, you know, with the aesthetics and certain elements that were removed from the first God of War. You know, the thing with God of War 2 is that, I mean, just the feeling of that game, it just felt like it was a bigger game, yes, and it was more... The universe or whatever, the worlds were more expanded. It felt more epic. It felt like a bigger experience. It felt like a bigger fight. It was a bigger deal because now you're dealing with gods, you know, the actual gods themselves. You're not just dealing with one god, which was Ares in the first game. But still, I mean, the first one, I think the first God of War was better than God of War 2 overall. You know what I'm saying? I just felt like God of War 1 was more complete. It felt more original, and it just felt... It felt like something I would play again, even though, yeah, it did not have as many bosses. Only had like a couple of bosses, and second God of War had way more bosses. I mean, both games are definitely amazing. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Both games have amazing quality, amazing production value, great music, breathtaking visuals, incredible backgrounds and graphics. The gameplay is very accessible, but you know, this simple but chaotic and mindless, calculated, you know, this style of killing. You know, you're basically killing the crap out of all these enemies and in different, like, brutal ways. So it's pretty awesome, man. I mean, they are awesome games. I don't think they're overrated, but I guess I can understand why some people would not get into them. You know, as far as personally, some people don't find it that amazing because probably they expect so much out of the games, like the same way I expected so much out of Resident Evil 4. It's just, it wasn't their cup of tea. You know, that style of gameplay probably wasn't their cup of tea. That's why some people say God of War, the God of War games are overrated, you know, because that's not their thing. They probably expected so much, all these different things. They probably expected something different. But, in my opinion, God of War, amazing, man. Incredible games. And who knows, maybe it's just me. I mean, maybe it is just me. You know, Resident Evil 4, not my cup of tea. I don't know about that, though, because I like Resident Evil. I'm a fan of Resident Evil. I've played previous games. You know, I've played, you know, Veronica. You know what I'm saying? I've played Outbreak. I like those games. And I enjoyed RE4. You know what I'm saying? I liked RE4. So, I don't know. I mean, I think it's just that back then, I think it was back then, at the time, it seemed like an amazing, incredible game. It seemed like a perfect game. You know, in 2004, 2005, with you know, not a lot of competition, not a lot of other games to compare it to, it certainly was a change from the Resident Evil franchise, and the fact that there was so much hype around it, and it was on the GameCube, and the GameCube didn't have a lot of other titles to compete against, because, let's face it, the GameCube wasn't exactly like, it didn't have a huge library, so it didn't have a lot of great games to compare it to. It had some great games here and there, but not nearly as much as other, you know, the PS2, definitely not on that level, and probably not even as much as the Xbox. But, so, you know, that's why people gave, you know, Resident Evil 4 so much, like, publicity and credit, because it's like, oh my god, the gem of the GameCube, you know, Resident Evil 4, or the same way that on the PS2, you have God of War, and God of War 2, etc. And on the Xbox, you had the Halo games, you know. I can understand that, but, you know, come on guys, it's not this perfect game, you know, it really isn't.